against systemic control, a path rooted for me in the days of COINTELPRO and the efforts to dismantle the civil rights movement, all the way up to the chilling reality of the modern digital state.
And that historical line is so important. I mean, when the government tried to neutralize organized resistance back then, the tools were manual. You had phone taps, informants, planted stories. Today, we're facing something so much more, well, insidious. It's the complete fusion of private tech, AI, and these centralized data hubs, these real-time information centers. It's a holistic ecosystem of control where the individual is just fundamentally exposed.
Centralized data. How does an average citizen even begin to mount a meaningful defense? Is our primary resistance a technological one, a counter strategy? Or does the focus have to shift to something deeper, to intellectual awareness, to moral organization, and to demanding real structural transparency?
Well, I would argue that the system's own reliance on public trust and its inherent economic flaws, like the need for secrecy and the massive labor displacement AI is causing, that these create exploitable vulnerabilities. So for me, the defense has to be structural. It has to focus on forcing transparency and accountability from the institutions holding all the cards.
And I assert that the overwhelming, almost invisible power of this new surveillance makes moral awareness and actively refusing the temptation of what McLuhan called technological numbness the only truly viable defense against the hidden oppression of the algorithm. My own experience with pervasive surveillance during the civil rights movement tells me this. If the oppressors of the 1960s had possessed the tools of today, the automated license plate readers, the integrated camera networks, the drones as first responders, well, the road to freedom would have been infinitely longer, perhaps impassable for a generation.
So you really believe this kind of technology would have secured Jim Crow laws, either, just in the South or even nationally?
Oh, without a doubt. We learned very early on that our greatest asset was our ability to communicate and organize in secret. Had a modern data aggregation platform. He would have known every single vehicle carrying a Freedom Rider into Alabama the moment it crossed the state line. Every meeting place, every line of communication, every potential protester could have been instantly identified, neutralized. Segregation would have just traded the visible brutality of the police dog and the water hose for the invisible, efficient brutality of the centralized list. That's a truly chilling thought. The critical danger today, which Marshall McLuhan saw so clearly years ago, is total numbness. We are swimming in an environment of constant surveillance, yet we accept this sort of choreographed dance of technological control as benign. We see it as safety or efficiency. The screens are glossy, the process is seamless, and we become, psychologically anesthetized to the fact that we're being watched constantly. The primary defense has to be a moral and intellectual awakening, a refusal to let the promise of convenience hide a new, systemically embedded form of Jim Crow.
I see why you emphasize the moral imperative, I really do. But I come at it from a slightly different angle. We have to view awareness as a strategic lever against the system's operational weaknesses. I absolutely acknowledge the immense power you're describing, but every high-tech system throughout history relies on secrecy to maintain its authority. I mean, think about the Cold War skunk works, these secret divisions building revolutionary aircraft. They built paradise ranches way out in the desert, far from public view. And when they feared exposure, they destroyed evidence. They literally destroyed the tooling used to build the Blackbird program just to ensure that political oversight couldn't figure out the scope of their capabilities. The modern surveillance state, it's built on proprietary software and centralized data, and it operates with that same hunger for obscurity. But here's the thing, the real-time information centers, the RTICs, and just for the audience, these are the nerve centers where all the citywide camera feeds, license plate readers, social media scrapers, audio streams get fused together. These RTICs claim that transparency and communication are vital to them to gain community support. That admission right there is the weak point we have to exploit. The citizen's job is to apply awareness as a strategy, externally, to demand proof that these centers are actually implementing the audit mechanisms and policies they claim to have.
But forcing proprietary systems to be transparent it's a bureaucratic nightmare. And while that fight for oversight is important, I agree, it risks distracting from the immediate threat. We're talking about the tyranny of the algorithm. The old Jim Crow was defeated when we forced the nation to see the injustice. Today, the violence is hidden. It's hidden behind invisible algorithms that operate at the speed of light. Just consider a specific example. Facial recognition is actively scraping public photos and cross-referencing them against protest attendance lists. You can be instantly identified, blacklisted nationwide. The oppression isn't visible. It's baked right into the predictive crime models that decide where police are sent and who gets flagged as a threat. So if the violence is hidden, how effective is demanding a committee review the database after the invisible harm has already been done?
You're absolutely right that this list operates at an incredible speed. But the systems can't operate completely in the dark. They can't, because they need public legitimacy to function within our cities, and they rely on massive amounts of public funds. So when the managers admit that transparency and communication are vital to their operation, we have to hold them to that standard, no matter how difficult the process is. The fight against the algorithm has to be institutional. Defense requires organized community boards and civilian review panels that have genuine teeth, the power to demand through legislation proof that these proprietary systems aren't infringing on liberties when they aggregate data from tools like Live 911 audio. We fight the opaque list by shining the bright light of accountability and, the power of the purse on the people who commission and run it. If we don't, we're just allowing the technological layer to be immune from democracy.
I'm just not convinced that political oversight alone can defeat what is, in essence, a psychological invasion. We have to look at the structural way this technology impacts our minds, something McLuhan, he described the effect of media, especially television and this electric environment, as pure X-ray.
That's a crucial point, and we should probably clarify for the audience what we mean by that.
Yes, absolutely. The X-ray effect, as McLuhan defined it, is the psychological stripping away of the individual's inner life. The old literate world provided a kind of mental buffer, a private critical space. The electric age, with its instantaneous, total information environment, it just dissolves that buffer. It creates an inner trip, and it fundamentally alters consciousness, inducing what he called total numbness to the surrounding technology. So if the technology itself is designed to make the citizen intellectually unaware, how can we rely solely on intellectual resistance? The fight is structurally rigged against the critical mind.
I agree that the psychological impact is profound, but I would frame the X-ray and the resulting retribalization not as a flaw of resistance, but as its fuel. McLuhan noted that the electric age is organic, and it promotes depth and involvement. And while it removes the old literary buffer, it creates a mind that demands depth or involvement, the dynamic mind of the hunter. This TV generation is just fundamentally different from the detached, linear-thinking older generations. It is primed for resistance because it refuses detachment. McLuhan himself pointed out that marginalized groups, specifically African Americans, and he used the term the Negro, which was of its time, were uniquely turned on by the integral instantaneous nature of electricity, because the fragmented, mechanical age had historically rejected them. He argued they felt they owned the world in this new electric reality. This inherent energy, this integral perspective that has to be channeled politically. It's not enough to just be aware. That awareness has to be converted into organizational power.
But that channeling requires resources, and that brings us to the economic dimension, which I fear is the greatest long-term threat. The control is enforced through the entire societal structure, starting with our education system. We're seeing a complete abandonment of the established labor class by AI.
And you're referring to the hunter-farmer dichotomy, right?
The system is run by the farmer, the case strategist, the established bureaucracy designed for routine and stability. This stable society is now abandoning the very labor class that embodies its routine, stable jobs like call centers, where an AI can now do the job better than a human. Meanwhile, the system keeps teaching the fragmented, classified data of the old world in schools, making citizens incapable of navigating the new electric reality. This engineered dependency, this technological gap, creates a mass class of people who are economically, functionally illiterate. They just can't access or critique the tools that rule them.
See, I struggle with the idea that the education system is the cause of the illiteracy. I think it's the symptom of a political and economic failure. The hunter-farmer dynamic shows that the system fears innovative, dynamic thinking just as much as it fears organized protest. I mean, the very tools of disruptive innovation were built by hunters, revolutionary thinkers, like the ones at Skunk Works. And what happened? They were immediately suppressed by the static farmer bureaucracy. Like when Secretary of Defense McNamara deliberately destroyed the specialized tooling for the Blackbird program. And why? To make sure that dynamic, disruptive innovation, the hunter's work, could not be easily restarted outside of the farmer's control.
But that very destruction of tooling led directly to the structural dependency we see now.
Precisely. And so the defense, therefore, is to fight this systemic political suppression. We have to empower the hunter through radical educational reform, shifting the focus from passive, traditional literacy to mediacy, the ability to understand and manipulate media and technology. If we demand technical training and critical analysis of digital tools, the citizen is not so economically crippled by the technological gap. We have to critique and disrupt the political failures that deliberately cause this precarity of the average citizen. That is the primary leverage the surveillance state holds over us. If a person is dependent on the system for their next meal, their moral courage is often superseded by the simple need to survive.
I would concede that economic security certainly strengthens the spine for moral resistance. If the system leaves you functionally illiterate and economically precarious, your ability to resist the seamless safety of the surveillance state is severely compromised, but the root of the problem remains psychological and moral. The farmer bureaucracy you describe relies on that numbness, the willingness of the citizen to trade privacy for convenience and stability. If we do not first achieve a moral and intellectual refusal of the list, the algorithms will continue to hide the oppression, regardless of how many oversight boards we manage to establish.
And if we don't dismantle the economic systems that render the hunter powerless, those oversight boards will be starved of funding and ignored by the very private corporations whose proprietary systems we're trying to audit. The political and economic vulnerability has to be addressed first to give moral awareness an effective lever to pull.
So we've explored two distinct yet, I think, complementary visions for the citizen's defense against this massive systemic power. I would maintain that we face an invisible war, one waged by opaque algorithms and centralized data, and it demands first and foremost an intellectual and moral awakening, a determined refusal to succumb to McLuhan's total numbness and the efficient, hidden brutality of the list.
And I would maintain that the practical path to freedom lies in fighting the visible institutional manifestations of this power, by demanding radical transparency, by exposing the system's engineered economic vulnerabilities, and by structurally empowering the dynamic mind to critique and disrupt the static bureaucracy.
We both agree, I believe, that the average citizen faces an unprecedented systemic power. It far exceeds the surveillance capabilities I knew firsthand from the COINTELPRO era. Had they wielded this technology in the 1960s, our movement would have faced much, much greater obstacles. We diverge, perhaps, on whether the primary counter-strategy should focus on cultivating moral courage against the psychological invasion, or on politically and economically exposing the system's structural weaknesses.
In the end, the objective is the same: ensuring that the X-ray that strips us all bare, that exposes the reality of our digital existence, is channeled toward the creation of the beloved community, one founded on justice and economic fairness, rather than allowing it to shackle us in a digital prison of steel and silicon. We have to continue to exercise vigilance over both the moral conditions and the material means of our freedom.
Always.